Okay, this is a how to get CakePHP live and development environments running on a Ubuntu 24.04 virtual machine, and that virtual machine could be in the cloud, it could be anywhere. So let's get started. The user that I've got is just the default user you create when you create the virtual machine as you run through the installation wizard. So it's got sudo privileges. What you notice with sudo is it sort of asks you to put a password every time you want to do something administrative. So let's just change that. So we're going to go sudoers.d and yt, and so we're going to say the user yt will have this incantation, will be allowed to do everything with no password. So write out, alright, hang on, O is write out, and X. Alright, so what that will mean is that we will be able to do everything without a password in the future. So every time we log in, one thing I don't like is update alternatives config. I want to change the editor because I use Vim, it's just what I prefer. So we're going to do that. Now we want to understand now we want to see how we're going to connect. So this has got this VM has already got an SSH server running, or well, at least it should. That's interesting. Okay, so it's running. I just can't see it as a probably. Yeah, you can't see it because it's running by root. Alright, so it's got an SSH server running, and what we want to do is using that IP address 192.168.255.131, we want to get access to it externally. So I'm going to start a terminal, and we're going to firstly connect to it, and we can see that we can log into the virtual machine. While we do this, we might just do a distribution upgrade and get those other files being installed. So we now want to connect to this server. So I'm going to create a new key pair, and alright, so that's created a new key pair in Windows, and then we want to actually make a config file. So in this version of VS Code, I have remote SSH, and allows you to edit things with autocomplete, which is great. So what we're going to do is create a SSH config file. You can do this so many different ways. In fact, let's do that. We'll do it the code way, the VS Code way. So firstly, you just say, okay, I'm going to log in as that to this IP address 168.255.131, and I'm going to update that one, and it creates it all for us. Now, so that we don't have, let's call it Ubuntu, and does it work? SSH ubt. Yep. But we want to, let's have a look at the authorized keys. There's nothing in there at the moment. Let's add our public key here, copy it and put it into, so if you have a look at authorized keys, it now has that public key. Now we'll go back out again, and this time it's prompting for a passphrase, but it's working. So what we want to do is we want to do SSH add, and it should, once we store that in the authentication agent on Windows, it should just work fairly well seamlessly if you type it correctly. Alright, so now we might just shut down this server after doing an upgrade, because I think it might have modified the kernel or put a new kernel in, not sure. So we just wait for this to come back up, and then we're going to start the process of installing everything that's needed just to get the environment running. So here we are, just waiting, and yeah, it looks like we're ready to log in. So we go ubt, and now we want to just do a whole bunch of installation steps. So we're going to, I'm just looking at off the screen just for a cheat, but we're going to start with sudo. Let's see if it's working. Yep, I don't have to authenticate. So I want to go sudo apt get, and you could go apt install as well. PHP Postgres, we're going to put a Postgres database in. We want to do intl extension. We want to do mb string. We want to do PHP FPM fast pass module, because we're going to use nginx as our web server. We want PHP XML to get some DOM stuff, and SQLite 3 for the debug kit database, default database. So once that's all done, we might also add our SQL server, and that should give us everything we need currently to get running. Alright, so as that configures itself, we now need to look at just what we need on our machines. pgAdmin, I've got, of course, VS Code, and let's now start. We'll start first with pgAdmin, getting Postgres functional. So to do that, what we want to do is change the password of the Postgres user in the database. So we just su up to that user, and then we go PSQL, Postgres SQL command line, and then type in password, \password, and then we just type in a password, and we've now changed the password in the database, and then we quit and exit. So once that's done, we can then register our virtual machine. So we call this ubt, and the connection is going to be localhost because we're going to tunnel into it with SSH, and we just set the password that we just set there in our virtual machine for the Postgres user, and then we turn on our SSH tunnel, and we say we want to connect to the IP address of that virtual machine accessible from outside. We want to say YT. Now we can use an identity file or we can use a password. So let's just use the password, and hopefully, I don't know if we can actually save the password after that. You might have already saved it, I don't know. You might have to enter it every time. But once that's done, we now can access our Postgres instance. And what we're going to start by doing is creating some logins. We're going to create one login for the live user, live database user, and we're going to create one for the test environment as well. Now you could create multiple roles to separate things, but you get the point of doing it this way. So we've got those two logins. Now we create our live database and make the live user the owner of it. Alright, so I'm not sure. Let's refresh. Maybe. I don't know what that error was, but it managed to save it. Let's try that one more time. Create another database, call it test, and maybe it's the ghost of Christmas past. Yeah, that's interesting. So maybe we have something a bit historical there coming through, but normally this would not happen. Normally you wouldn't get that error, but we can just proceed onwards. So we've got test and then save. Right, and that's, I think, just an error caused by me having connected this to the exact same databases previously, but it's not actually an error that you'd get if you're doing it in the first instance. So we've now, if we just have a look, just to make sure everything's owned by the right roles, login roles, we now have our databases created. And let's now go back to our VM and install apt install composer, because we also want to be able to install CakePHP. It looks like just need to alright, so we're going to go CakePHP 5 installation and go to here and we have, here we go, this is what we want. I don't want the quick start, I want the, isn't it funny how this one, here we go, and what we're going to do is we're going to put everything in var ww. So I'm going to go make a directory called test and make a directory called live, and then change the ownership to my user for both. And then in test, we're going to create a CakePHP environment. while that installs, yes, that'll do. Yes, okay. So while that installs, we can think about creating a Git repository. So we want to init this as a Git repository. Git config global. So we want to do this user.name, that's me, and email address, and git branch, let's call it main, git status, git add, git commit, initial commit. So we have our Git repository working there, and in the near future we will be able to then, and if we have a look, we can say composer install into live as well, and so there's our live and test instances. So now let's work to get our database and our web server running and connected. So if we go to our browser and we type the email address, not the email address, the IP address, we can see our nginx server's already running, but we need to configure it to serve our CakePHP instances. So let's do that now. So we're going to go into sites available, and if we have a look in sites enabled, we can see that this default site available is linked there. So if we go into here, we can see that at the moment there's no PHP configuration. So instead of doing all this and typing it laboriously, what we're going to do is I'm going to hit the letter D in my Vim editor and Control G, and then I realise that I'm actually currently not got enough permissions, so I'll go sudo that, go and then just delete everything and then hit the I button and get the ability to paste in a new configuration. Now this new configuration, if we just look through it, it's got a couple of things that we're not using. This block here is so that if people connect to the root, it automatically redirects them to the live. And if we were going to use that, we would change this to @web here, so it would, if it wasn't a file and it wasn't a directory that it was being asked for, it would then automatically redirect to the live instance, but we don't want that. So I'm just going to press the U key to reverse this. I'm going to delete this, the D key, and notice also we've added index.php here, and then we've created two locations and set for each location them to the web root of each installation of CakePHP. Now here we have how it passes off any PHP files to FPM, and we're just going to leave this as it is at the moment and save it, and then just do a syntax check, and straight away we notice that our syntax check is failing because there's a file being referenced that doesn't exist. So we'll just go in and comment that out for the time being, and then do the syntax check again, and then we go system control restart, and at the moment it seems like my autocomplete's not working, so I'm just going to exit and then go back in and just see if that restart. Yeah, okay, so just pressing tab auto completes, the bash completion works, so I can restart the nginx service. Now if I go to this IP address and I go to live, I get a database driver is failing. If I go to the test location, I get bad gateway. So what we're going to do is fix these errors. We're going to start with the bad gateway because it's basically we've got to create for the test environment a parallel PHP FPM environment. So let's do that. So going back to our terminal, we go etc systemd and into the system directory, and what we're going to do is find our PHP FPM service file, and we're going to copy from that multi-user target wants directory this service file, and we're going to rename it to -test, and then we're going to edit it, and we're going to change the description to dotenv, and here we're going to, because it's a parallel environment and you cannot set assertions in anything but the PHP ini, we need to specify that we're going to use our own custom PHP ini. And we also need to change our PHP FPN conf file, and again we're going to not entirely sure, but I'm just going to make sure all these are changed as well. Test, 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 and this is -test, and then -test. So that now is all our changes for this service file. Now what we want to do now is we want to go system control, check if it's enabled, but it'll say it's not. So disabled, and then we want to enable it. So we'll go enable, enable PHP test, and then it links it to be in the same place as their default PHP FPM service file. So now let's go into our FPM directory and copy each one of our files to have a parallel companion for our new environment. And before we move on, each one that we create, we need to edit to make sure that they're separated from each other, each environment. Now here, there, and then we want to edit the test ini. Now I'm going to leave this one unedited because we're going to come up against an error that we want to understand the cause of. Go here, and then we go pool test, and go move, and I'm just going to change the name of that so it's obvious, and I'm going to leave the groups the same at the moment, and basically give ourselves parallel environment so one doesn't stomp on the other. Oops. Just go minus capital G to get to the bottom. And we're just looking at all the different options, but most of it we're going to leave the same, and we just then save it. So now what do we need to do to continue on? Well, once we've system control restart, and we just go service and we go PHP 8.3 and then test. Now we should be able to just have a look, and we should be able to see the parallel pool running, and that should now give us a working test environment as well. But just looking at the test environment, if you go nginx, sites, enabled, default, and have a look at test, you can see that here the fast CGI is using a test socket, and it's completely separate from this default PHP FPM socket. Right, let's have a look in a browser and see if we get something other than bad gateway. So now we get a complaint that the database driver can't be used because we didn't install the PHP MySQL extension, did we? So now what we want to do is get our VS Code editor connected using our Remote Explorer. So if we have a look at our installed extensions for VS Code, we've got Remote SSH, and that's what we need to be able to connect into our virtual machine. So we click on Remote Explorer, we're looking at for tunnels, and then we connect to the Ubuntu server that we created earlier. Now, interestingly, that's the reason why. So what we need to do now, once we connect, it then installs a server component so that VS Code can talk to the virtual machine and run all its necessary remote processes. So you just have to wait for that to complete. And then once that's done, you get a terminal, and we obviously want to open up our test environment, which is under var www test, and go OK. And yes, I trust the authors, and don't show that again. And we need to, first things first, we need to now set up our database connections. Now the database that we're using is Postgres. So I'm just going to specify Postgres. Now notice that I haven't got autocomplete there, and there's a good reason for that. And if we have a look at our extensions, PHP IntelliFence is not installed currently in the remote Ubuntu server. So we just have to click install, and that extension will then install itself in the remote VM. And now we get autocomplete. So the autocomplete does the automatic pull-in of the class that's needed at the top. So you won't have to do that if you're using this IntelliFence plugin or extension. Now this is our test instance, so we want to connect to the test user role. The password I think I set was that, and the database is the test database. Now everything else is pretty much the same. So what we're going to do for the test database, we're going to just change that, and then hopefully we then have a working Cake instance. Now it's saying password authentication failed for user. Let's go and have a look at that and set the password. Maybe that's what we need to do. You go to the user, go to password, just put our password that we used in, and I better double check while I'm here that the same password has been set correctly for the other role. Now hopefully now that will get rid of that, and the next thing that we want to do is look at this send assertions to 1. So what we were doing earlier was copying our environment, our PHP-FPM environment, to a test environment. So now we just need to make sure that our PHP ini that we're running, the test one, has the correct development settings. So you can see here Zend assertions currently is 1, but that's for production. We want to set it to 1 to allow assertions. And another thing we might do, and you would know from your own experience the different things that you might tweak in your PHP ini, but one that I typically like to do is give my development environment a little bit more memory, because debug kit tends to use more memory when you're running it. So then we do that, and then we want to say system control restart PHP 8.3 test service, and hopefully now that will cause the assertions error to disappear. Now this is interesting. At the moment, if I go into var www test and I go bin cake plugin, is it plugins or plugin loaded? Plugin loaded. We can see that debug kit is actually active, and it's not showing up. We should be seeing at the very bottom here a debug kit outline, but it's not showing up. So I'm just going to go to developer tools and just try this empty cache and hard refresh, and it's appeared. So sometimes things won't show up when you expect them to, and you do need to refresh the browser or just remove the cache. Now it's saying here, please be aware that this page will not show when you turn off debug mode. So now we're going to create our live environment with, if we have a look at our live environment, we've still got those error messages. So now we're going to just move across to our live environment and get it working as a live environment. So not in debug mode, and with a default page. So in test, we do all our development in test, don't we? So we're now just going to have a look in test. We've got to provide an ability to provide configuration in test. So I'm just going to get my terminal up, go into the config directory, and what we want to do is copy .env example to .env, and then we'll just say, okay, in this directory it's the test environment, we want debug to stay, and we're just going to comment out security.salt, because app_local, if we scroll to it, already has security.salt set here. Okay, so how do we get this to activate? Well, we go into Bootstrap, and then we scroll till we find our .env code, and then we just uncomment it and save it, and it says if there's no environment variable app name and the env exists, then use .env for configuration. Now in the .env file it gives this warning: having this file in production is considered a security risk and also decreases the bootstrap performance of your application. So now we're going to do the live instance configuration. So we're not going to use .env, we're going to use fast CGI. Not sure if this is exactly the right way to do it. If someone knows a better way or can educate me, I'd really like that. But what I'm going to do, I'm just going to take our configuration variables, and then I'm going to go into nginx, and I'm going to create a, we call it fast CGI params -live file, and I'm going to paste this in, and then I'm going to do some fancy replacement with Vim. So I'm going to replace Vim with fast CGI param, and then I'm going to replace the equal sign with a space, and finally, I'm not sure if this is going to work, so I might have to undo it. I'm going to change the end of line character with this, and it didn't seem to work the way I hoped it would. So I'm just going to go back and I'll do it manually. So let's just put our semicolon, and in this case we're going to call the app name is live. We're going to leave debug is true for a minute so we can show you the challenges. So, and then we go to sites available, or it could be enabled because they both lead the same place, and include this params file, and then system control restart PHP 8.3, and I'm not sure, but I'll just do the web server as well, and let's see what happens with live. So at the moment we're still having an issue there, so I'm just going to go var ww test git status git add git commit. Alright, so git remote, so I need to go to the live instance, git remote, I think it's git status. Now I'm going to change git checkout to a new branch here, and then I'm going to go git pull origin main, and it should just pull in all those changes, and we should now have, I tell a lie, we should now almost have a working configuration. So what we need to do here, we can open the live folder, okay, so that's from an old run through I did, so I'm just going to go here and open the live instance here via www live, okay, and we need to set up yes I trust just need to set up the correct connection to our, so we go driver, Postgres, we want the username is live, and the password is, and the database is live. Now from there, I don't think we need to do anything else because we don't use a test database on our live instance, but let's see if this works now. And now it's saying you should set to 1 but we're in live, so we don't want assertions enabled in live. So now we need to go in. Let's go in here and go vim, etc., nginx, and set debug to false, and reload, and theoretically we should now have another error message. So let's now go, let's close that one, and we're currently in live here, and file open, another, let's go, well, hopefully that one will work. Alright, so we should be in the test area here now. Let's close everything, and now we want to just make a controller so we can show ourselves pulling in environment from each environment. So I'm just going to go bin cake bake controller. I'm going to call it start controller. I'm only going to have one action, and so in this controller all I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this, and I'm going to say right, just pull in app name, and then create here under the start controller new file index.php and PHP file, and we call it start. We might put it in paragraph marks, and then we go start, and we go git status, git add all that stuff, git commit, and we just need start controller, and then go into our live environment and go git pull origin main to pull it into our current branch, so the live branch. And now let's have a look. It's still going to be a problem. If we go start, it'll be fine. So we might just go into routes and routes and just change that so that by default go to the start controller and the index action and get rid of that. So we can just commit that. Yes, save our changes, and let's just pull them into our live environment, and this time it should just, yeah, naturally just go to that. Right, so then if we go back to our test environment, we have our test environment variable being pulled from .env. We have our debug kit toolbar, along with our environment being pulled from .env, but in the live environment we are using nginx to pass our variables in. So that has been a very brief video on getting production and development environments running side by side on a Ubuntu 24.04 virtual machine.